live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the Aforza Vertical AI podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about the vertical AI and technology opportunities for the consumer goods industry. And I'm ever so excited to be joined this week by Mike Price from the Retail Execution Management. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Andy. It's great to be here. I'm excited and great to have a chat with you.
Excellent. So we've got a full docket today, lots to talk about. But maybe just to warm up our listeners, maybe just start with a bit about yourself, your personal journey, and what's really brought you to this point in your career.
I've been involved with retail execution now for 25 years.
Wow.
So I think the word veteran or old-timer...
Thought leader, right? Yeah.
could be applicable. I started my life in retail. So I started life at Sainsbury's many years ago.
Right.
And I then carried the bag. And in my time when I was in account management, I could clearly see the link between the stores where execution was well executed and sales versus the alternative. And that's how I really got into it. And I've been then involved with it, leading teams in the UK, Europe and globally for the last 25 years.
Wow.
So
and let's talk about some of the companies that you've worked for then in that period.
So I started life carrying the bag for Britvic soft drinks, the Pepsi bottler.
Yeah.
And I did 10 years there. I did 10 years at Gillette. And I did 15 years at Unilever. And that took me eventually to a program that covered over 30 countries on my own. So I was a one-man execution machine.
Wow.
And that took me around the world. So I was very, 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 very lucky and very successful.
Excellent. So we talk about industry experience, 10, and 15. So 35 years in the industry.
And and I've collected over 700,000 files on my OneDrive from my execution life. So I've felt like a sort of Google of execution.
Sure. So I bet you've seen some good stuff, some bad stuff, some stories, and that's what today's all about. So we'll get into some of that.
But trust me, been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt.
Fantastic. So this podcast is all about vertical AI, but with that, we're really talking about innovation and technology in the front office space. So today, just based on your experience, I'd love to dive into some of the stuff you're seeing in this space, just how things have changed, but then really double down. And I know you're quite passionate about the whole area of photo automation, image recognition, taking insights from stores and doing something about it. So we'll make sure we dive into that as well. But maybe the first point to double down on, given your experience and what you've seen, what do you think are some of the key challenges that exist today in the retail scene when it comes to executing that perfect store from a front office perspective?
I think there's been a lot of focus, I guess, on the definition stage. So companies are very clear at defining clearly what you want against the marketing piece. The challenge is you go off and agree that, and then there's varying standards of execution. And because field models have evolved, you end up with a sort of headless commerce situation where the back end things talk to each other to varying degrees. But when you then get down to the field, you're often working with different partners, with different systems. It's very siloed. Yeah. The timelines don't always align. The store coverage is different, the feedback, the frequency. So you get this unfortunate disconnect. So you don't really cleanly understand what's going on.
And do you think, from your experience across the companies you've worked on, do you think this disconnect has come from being reactive and buying point solutions, or because there wasn't a strategy, or because things have changed? Do you think there's any reason for this situation where you've got these silos? Because it's certainly a common theme that we talk about on the podcast, and people have said again and again, and it's something that's not going away.
I think there's probably a combination of factors. I think sometimes it is having a lack of a clear strategy and perhaps a framework of how you actually manage end-to-end execution. And that was the thing that certainly in my last 7 years, where we had a very clear framework, we were able to understand the challenges and pain points and deliver solutions against that. And that varied by market and even by category. So I think the first thing is, without a clear strategy, without a clear framework, even having clear leadership that understands it.
Yep.
Because so often what happens is, and I've seen this, we've stood up and local market leaders say, you can't tell us, we know what to do here. execution is very localized. So you've got this, you've got hundreds of local suppliers in market, and therefore you end up with, say, just this, you can't get visibility back into the center of what is actually going on.
What's going on, right?
In a coherent way. So it's not through poor intent, but it's a lack. If you don't have a clear strategy, a clear framework, and clear guidelines, you're going to end up, unfortunately, just wasting money, duplicating time, duplicating effort, and actually, I'm sure the number of senior leaders sitting at the board, what's going on out in store. That's actually, do you know what, has been one of the hardest questions to answer.
Yep. No, brilliant. And that really brings me on to my next question. So what you're saying there essentially is, with the best intentions, the best planning tools, if it's not getting executed that way in the store, then it almost doesn't matter, right? And that disconnect it can be very painful and challenging from a trade spend perspective, ROI, just executing your strategy.
Without a doubt, I would think one of the key frustrations of talking to equivalent specialists in the trade term space, the analysis they've done, they know that the trade terms return on investment probably isn't as good as it should be.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter how great you can go through, and I was in my 10 years as an account manager, advanced negotiation. So you rock up, you apply everything you've been taught. It's fantastic, it's agreed, it's signed at head office. But actually as part of a JBP. But if it doesn't actually, then when you go out and it's not executed, hang on, Houston, we've got
a problem, right?
We've got a real problem. And that is unfortunately still the case today in so many markets and so many players.
And that need to connect planning to execution is something we fundamentally live and breathe at Aforza, and it's so important to us. But it's a really key point to this getting it right and knowing that what you're planning is getting executed in store.
I couldn't agree more. I think if you actually look at, and most people, again, they think in silos. Yep. So if you actually think about your total investment, where do you invest your money? So when people say, and I've had the conversations, oh, that's expensive, we don't want to spend, what do you mean we're going to have to spend 100,000? Okay, what's your total execution spend? 5-10 million. What's your total spend included trade terms and everything else? Well, 40-50 million. So
aren't small sums of money, are they?
So we're actually having the wrong conversation there. We should be looking at the total cost of operations, where and how the total is invested, rather than just focusing on every individual component part within the almost, if you like, the tech space within the broader model. Because people, historically, execution was a people-led model.
Yep.
So, and I've been there and done it. It was in vogue at the time in the early 2000s. More people visiting more stores more often equals better execution. And do you know what? That's not actually true.
No, it's changed.
It's changed. It doesn't.
Well, it's changed. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
But I've been there and done it, and I've seen the evolution over my time towards a more tech-led execution. So
I love that.
So players and partners like you can be far more a pivotal, collaborative partner to help. Ultimately, you have to do three things: sell more, win market share, and deliver the bottom line.
Yep.
That's what you want your partners to come to the table and do.
And there's some really exciting technology now that makes that possible, which we're gonna double down and talk about. And I know, before we talk about the technology, one of the things you said there is knowing what's going on from an execution perspective in store is ever so important. And I know you're a big believer in photo automation, image recognition, taking action from what you've seen. And I think there's no end of photos from a store perspective, whether they're taken by the rep, by the retailer, CCTV cameras now, there's all sorts of technology. But I think it's the challenge of doing something with those photos that I know you focus a lot on. And maybe do you want to double down on what you're seeing in that space?
If I can sort of take you back a little bit on the history. So sure. I can remember going back to when there was only, when image recognition first came out. I can remember meeting the early players. There was, if I can name people, there was Trax, Planorama, and one other company. And we actually did an equivalent of bake-off. We did measure-off. We had the three companies. We went to a store and we did a manual audit, and we did this image recognition audit. And it was like, wow, not only is it a lot quicker, but it actually identified the accuracy issues that occur with manual audits. So I was sold right from the beginning. So
Always a believer.
Always a believer from
Yep.
2012, 2013, and so rolled this out in my last life at Unilever to 20 plus markets. And we saw not only the efficiency benefits, which is normally how it's first sold. There's a time saving, there's an efficiency.
So you can do more, maybe more visits.
Yeah, exactly,
Yep.
more categories, whatever. So that's you can only bank that once.
Yep.
And then to your point, what do you do? Because you're building up gigabytes of photos. So it builds up, but it's, as you say, it's what you then actually do with it. And often, because you're working with a partner and it's on their system, how do you actually get that information back in a timely format to actually do something with it? So I think the big question is so what?
Yeah.
So we've got hundreds of thousands, millions of photos, and we're possibly are we getting it at the right time? Because the traditional field model is a Monday to Friday operation.
Right.
But I go out in stores and I posted stuff on LinkedIn Saturday night. Yeah. Look at the out of stocks then.
When people are there still buying, we've got 24-hour stores now. It's completely
exactly this. So then people go, do you know what? I can address that. I'll tell you what, let's do some crowdsourcing audits. So we're bringing a crowd and we equip them with IR. So they go out and they take photos. But then their photos are on their reporting system. And actually the field force is on another system. So that doesn't connect. So what do you
more silos, right?
Exactly. It goes back to this siloed mentality. So what you're trying to do of bringing everything together, and I've tracked your journey. You were saying you guys were just evolving when I was sort of in the process of thinking about moving on to going out on my own. But bringing, from day one, I've seen how you've evolved and tried to bring everything together to join up the dots. And that is the fundamental thing I think that's missing. And if I could have my time again, which I can't, or if I was came out of semi-retirement and went back and did it again, which if anybody would take an old timer, I think I would do it very, very differently to how it's done.
And you've always been, thank you, a big fan of what we've done with the Studio Marketplace and complimented us on the journey. Maybe for people that are less familiar with what we've done there and kind of what it means from a business perspective, it'd be nice to just double down on this whole concept of the Studio Marketplace, photo automation, and if you could explain, just from a business perspective, going from taking a photo to doing something about it and what that ecosystem means, I think it's really valuable. Yeah.
So when I first saw that when you presented that and shared that, I put it in the category of, wow, that's a game changer, and I've seen a few.
Okay.
So to context, I saw it with POS data back in 2004-05. I'm showing my age here.
Yeah.
I saw it with crowdsourcing around 2010-11 and the launch of IR around the same time. But since then, there's been a void.
Okay.
I haven't seen anything that I thought, do you know what? What's really going to change? But when you came out with Marketplace Studio, I thought, wow, somebody actually is addressing the real issue. Because what happens so often is people work with an individual partner. And you'll come along and you'll sell all the features and all the other benefits. And somebody go, oh, that's great, but actually we've got a contract with X or Y, or we do it slightly differently. So therefore, the alignment of one partner, whether it's POS data, whether it's IR, to an SFA partner, is actually quite antiquated now because of the localization, and people normally work with more than one. Even if they've got a global contract, they're going to work with others in markets. Let's get real here.
Yep.
So I think the concept of building what I would almost think of as a marketplace or a platform approach,
like an ecosystem,
exactly, allows people to basically be far more flexible in the approach they take and how they then build a sort of composable commerce solution versus the headless commerce that we've almost had in the past.
Yep.
So when I looked at that, and then I've seen some of the partners you brought on, the early stage partners, there's some good partners in there, and I think it can only grow. And I think people they shouldn't be scared of it. I think they should embrace it. Yeah. I really do, because it's like you're not actually. Might sound weird, but you're not actually competing against each other. You're part of
bring it together.
Exactly. You're part of a far more modular, flexible, that's operating model that actually, and it's not then about, it then moves on beyond reporting. It then moves, the future is going to clearly be in the insight, the analytics, but the action. And by building the journey you're on, actually allows from the photo, from the insight, does it go back to key account management? Does it potentially go to supply chain? If you were running a customer collaboration type meeting, what would be unbelievable to get to as a place where in these sort of, few of the people we've got collaboration centers, you imagine it almost having like an operations room where you could bring up the live photos and hone in and understand the whole category.
The trends,
yeah,
the
exactly.
things.
What's the competitors doing? So it's beyond, but most people are just stuck in the sort of field efficiency piece. That's the bit that's missing, the opportunity for what
it's not just siloed tools, it's siloed thinking, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly that. So you could then look at the whole category, your competitors, you'd understand better about the trade terms element, and ultimately it's not just a field tool, but because the sort of execution field forces, it's like it's out there, we don't really understand it. And often when people have looked at perhaps changing this, how do you change a situation, you find they come back and go, okay, we've done a bit of early diagnostic, we've got a hybrid situation, we've got some internal people, we've got external different partners with different tools and solutions. Actually, we're not sure we want to start that battle. But they see it as a battle. But they go, because there's battles that we've got to fight. And then with the limited resources that we now have, or reducing resources, that's not a battle we want to start. But actually, it doesn't have to be a battle. That's the thing. I think if you're a bit smarter and you've got the strategic thinking and you move out of siloed thinking and you have a collaborative partner that basically becomes almost the backbone or the infrastructure to bring in and pull it together, and then what you're doing. Honestly, for me, I thought, when I map that out, that will go down as one of the game changer evolutions that I've seen over my 25 years.
That's awesome to hear.
Which is why it's actually really an exciting time to be an execution leader.
So you're saying if you were back in your roles, would you do it all again? You'd take this approach?
I would do it. What I would stick with, I think you need to understand the themes that are driving change. So clearly the evolution to data intelligence was called out a few years ago. I think tech-led execution called out a few years ago. Come back to talking about syndication, which hasn't taken off as much. But I think if you look at the future themes, and then understand, you definitely need a clear strategy. I think you need a clear framework and the component modules in that. And then the difference now, which I would add on, is to work with collaborative, consultative partners that would build that more modular, composable commerce solution, which just didn't exist. I can remember having different, trying to get data, with the teams would try and get data from different solutions, and even to put it on a page, and then going, so people have got to try and interpret this column from the POS data, this column from the IR data, and
it's
this
so
column,
abstract, isn't it?
Yeah,
and left to interpretation.
Exactly, so abstract and so difficult. Where what you're building now with the vertical AI allows for the processes to be correctly defined. The personas to be correctly mapped to those processes, and it actually becomes part of the fabric of the way of doing it. So actually, I'm, despite a few more grey hairs, I'm actually think it's an amazing, what an amazing time to potentially be an execution leader. And I would build on the component parts that I know work, but I would do if you call it the tech part, completely differently.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you just touched there on vertical AI, and of course, what was it now? 2 months ago, you attended our vertical AI launch in London, and you're a part of the community there, where we touched on not just photo automation, but really how you bring vertical AI elements into connecting that whole end-to-end journey. And I think again, just to bring it to life for our listeners, we're not just talking about going into a store now, taking a picture of shelf space and comparing it to a planogram, but we're talking about being able to maybe take a picture of a drink in an on-trade setting and compare it and do quality checks against it. The whole kind of the world that this technology operates in is changing, and it can help reps in every aspect of market and go to markets. What kind of excites you the most in that space? Were there any particular use cases that really jumped out to you from what you saw?
I think firstly, I guess the joined up approach to recap what I talked about before, so the move away from the silo thinking. But I really like the fact that you can now integrate voice.
Yep.
So the idea that I can talk and I don't have to write notes or tap stuff in.
So the whole multimodal side.
The whole modal piece, I think, to bring it together, and how it then automates the tasks that actually then drive our action. So the role actually changes. So I think you go from historically, a lot of it was effectively an administrative role. It was a checking administrative. If you're being honest, if you do time and motion studies of where people spend their time, the actual selling component can be really, really small.
Yep.
So I think
that customer facing time, that quality time is
and I think it's a combination. It's from moving away from manual audits to obviously to photo audits. It's how you potentially bring in POS data, other whether it's cell site data, whatever it could be. I think the fact that you can automate the processes behind it because you understand the buyer persona roles, and also how the personas talk to each other, because you could have different roles.
They're not siloed either,
exactly.
Right? Yep.
Going to a store, so there's nothing worse than, say, you have a sales rep with one system doing one thing in one silo today, and then you've got a merchandiser going to the same store at a different time, and they perhaps can't talk to each other, or they've got to WhatsApp each other, or can't get a signal and try and call. It's come on, to capitalise on the technological advancements, to just say bring it together into one seamless journey to unlock the insight and then the action, which ultimately it's about selling more. That's why you exist. When people look at their SG&A line and think, why do I spend globally billions in this space? That's it's not a nice to have. It should be an added value resource. It should be, and I guess how I would summarise it is: do you see execution as an investment or a cost?
Yeah.
And it's very different, and that's the sort of first question. And people go, "Well, it's a cost line. It's on the SG&A." No, it's a cost. Their output is very different, and actually, I would say behind those that say it's an investment, because it comes back to what we said, the strategic thinking. So if you think of every, whether it's pound, dollar, euro, won, doesn't matter, however you invest, whatever your currency, and track the return on that through some test versus control basis, or perhaps other ways of doing it. If you see execution as an investment, you will invest in, with partners like you who will then have the vision and the innovation in the 100+ people in your space that exist, which never ceases to amaze me, of how do you stand out? And so I was sold, and I'm a big fan.
I love that. I love that. It's an investment area. It's an investment area for growth, and there's never been a better time where the tools available to make that happen.
I think exactly. I think if you look back and look forward on where we are today, you need to be in real time. But if you look at the trade terms levers, retail execution can be and should be a lever for growth. It shouldn't be this cost line. And so often what happens today is when people are under pressure and the P&L is under pressure, and I've written about it many occasions, people salami slice what they've got.
Yep.
They look at it and they say, we're not going to fundamentally change it. We're not going to change your thinking. We're not going to change it, but we'll cut a bit off of this, we'll cut a bit off of that. We'll change the span of control. So instead of managing X, you're going to have to manage Y. We'll do this, we do that. And basically, we just carry on as normal. And everybody goes, okay, we've saved X%. Aren't we wonderful? Tick box, move on. And then the next year, you're in the same boat.
And you're not growing, or it's not having that positive impact.
Well, as against saying, you know what, we need to almost, it's not a case of rip this up. It's a case of, most people are into, and I said to people, are you looking for an evolution or a revolution?
Yep.
And those that are, we're into evolution, that's more the salami slice. We're just going to evolve slowly. Whereas if somebody actually turned around and said, look, we need to do this very differently, which is exactly what we did back in my former life at Unilever in 2014. We just ripped it up and started again, and it was incredibly.
And that's
successful.
where you get the real step changes in performance.
Exactly, and the biggest change was around seeing execution then as an investment, and not and that whole psychological change from the top down, and success breeds success.
Absolutely,
so if you're
absolutely
more successful, but part of it, I'll be honest, is having the right partners. It's like a marriage. It is like a marriage, and people would say, why won't you? Why were we unsuccessful? Or why didn't you work with us? And it's like, because when you say yes to somebody, you're putting, you really are in it together. Again, the phrase I evolved way back was, we win together or we lose together as partners. So it's not about who.
And if it's not going right, we're going to help, and we're going to make this work. It's a partnership.
And that needs openness and transparency on both parts. And that's why I've seen so what I've seen, and when I came to the event, the questions that were asked, and I thought the openness of the answers was refreshing.
Yeah.
Because so often you get this sort of politically
sort of BS, yes.
Yeah. Sort of stage managed, filtered, political. I can almost imagine somebody in the ear of the presenter giving you the political.
Don't answer that.
You're thinking, what a load of nonsense. I've given up my time to be an. So it was incredibly refreshing to have just an open discussion. And I think then that followed through with the conversations afterwards and whatever. So listen, it was great to be invited. I don't have many friends in the industry. I over time.
I think because you're so open and truthful, right?
I'd be quite challenging because I'm a challenge. I think the existing things do need to do.
That's what the industry needs.
It needs to change. So that unfortunately marginalises a lot of the laggards and people who are hanging on to the past. So I'm not quite saying I get trolled and hate mail, but I certainly don't get many Christmas cards anymore. So it was really refreshing. So I think what you guys have done in that is really great.
Brilliant. Now, I want to double down on a point that I think is very topical right now. And you talked about this difference of, is it an efficiency saving or is it a lever for growth? When we were talking about these technologies. And in the advent of AI right now, there's a lot of different companies talking about, are agents somebody that replaces a role or that helps and augments a role? And I guess this could vary persona by persona, but do you have any viewpoints on just, if you roll forward 5-10 years, where you see the agent side of AI taking things when it comes to headcount in companies?
I think, to be honest, I think it will, this is going to sound a bit of a strange answer, because I think the headcount could go up, but I think the roles will change, and I think you'll see far more flexible roles.
Yep.
So I think the days of big fixed field teams will evolve and are
sort of change.
They need to change. So it's away from just the salami slicing. So they are coming down. So I think there's an opportunity to have far more flexible, curated, whether it's a curated crowd or a flexible resource that can visit stores when the opportunity, when it's either generated from the AI generates the immediate alert that you need to go. So I think there's a numerous benefits to having a bigger but more flexible operation. So I think headcount could go up, but I think the roles supported and driven by AI and the
I love that.
But I think the actual, and I think the investment level then could potentially go up as well. But if you see it as an investment and it drives success.
But back to your framing and your narrative, if everything's focused on growth, why can't we do more in different ways? And I think that's kind of what you're saying here. It's not just a cost-cutting exercise. It's focus on growth, focus on the change in the game, and using AI to essentially supercharge what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think a large part of it is people are actually scared of change. A lot of the people historically I think you've got two sorts of leadership groups that exist now. One has probably been around a while and is more my generation, and often people then, they don't want to change. They're fearful of what it could mean. They don't want to disrupt the existing organisation. Often they work with people many years, and I've dealt with people and thought, this just isn't going to happen. They're the blockers. The board want change. The senior leadership want change. But when it gets down to the operational level and people block change, or you've got other, possibly younger, dynamic leaders of the future who don't have the experience, and often they don't know necessarily what to do. They understand, listen, they're far more technologically advanced than I am. I knew exactly what I wanted the tech to do.
Right.
And I was always quite intrigued when people say to me, so you come out, what was your last role in IT? And I'm like, listen, I can barely turn the laptop on relative to other people.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what I want it to do.
You had the vision, right?
I had what I want. So I said, that's why I'm working with you, because you're the one that actually understands what goes on in the little black box. I don't get it. I don't need to understand it. But I know how I can use that as an enabler or a lever for growth to win.
Yeah.
So I think you've got, in a lot of cases, it's the leadership mentality that is actually the blocker to change, because the board want change, and it comes down when then people find reasons of why we shouldn't change, and that's what permeates back up. It's and then you get this.
That's when you get the silos, because it's easy. It's a point solution. You can get it in without changing. And Yep.
So I think there's a huge opportunity, and if you look at some of what's going to happen, you said about the next 5 years, I think you will see, unfortunately, more localization, which goes against the trend of trying to reduce duplication, reduce cost. But post what people went through in COVID, they have reduced global or central teams. There was a move during in that time, those few years, and I said the high cost inflation period to manage stuff locally. So I think that trend will just continue to be execution will be more locally driven. However, the need then is for a more flexible way of operating, which is where what you're doing with Studio Marketplace and some of the others
brings it together.
Exactly is the enabler, because it actually becomes this composable commerce solution. So I think you're very well placed, and I think you're almost ahead of the curve, or you're certainly riding the wave, the curve, to be able to deliver solutions that people will need to address that localization. So it's how do we manage, because we work with all these different parts. There's 50, on my list, there's 51 people in the IR space. Okay, that's across robotics, cameras, and predominantly mobile solutions. And I still get calls. Hi, Mike, I've seen you on LinkedIn. Can we have a chat? Okay. Oh, yeah, we're launching this. We're another IR partner. Really? And you're a bit late to the party, aren't you, in 2024? But it's, we've got this contract with X in this market. Okay, so this is the localization continues. So it needs a far more modular approach, I think, to go forward. I think the other thing is you'll see more retailer control. It'll be a slow evolution, but as retailers and retail stores become more the media channel, I think you'll start to see, and as part of JBP planning and optimizing things, do we really need to do things in the way we did? So I think that will open up.
Ripping up the rule book and
exactly,
doing things
more
differently.
syndication opportunities, and then it's, well, how do we get different people again to all use one standardized system? So again, it comes back to what you're offering. We can work with different partners in different ways and ultimately drive insight and action rather than just reports. Or just got, and as you say, thousands of photos. So what?
What are you doing with them, right?
So exactly.
So you talked about there some of the things you think are going to happen in the next 5 years. What, if you had to pin it down to one thing you're most excited about, is there anything that really jumps up?
I think it's going to be I honestly believe it's going to be the flexibility. If I had to choose one word, so what's the word to take out of this? I would say it's going to be the need, flexibility, and that was the one thing. And to move away from silos, and now what is offered with what you're offering, I think is what was being missing in the past, is the opportunity for complete flexibility to build, say, composable solutions that just didn't exist in the past. So I think that's the thing that excites me most. And I think, say, if you're doing the job today, the opportunities are so different to one I look back on, what was successful, but wow, what could it be now if you took the history of the past and applied it to the future?
Absolutely. Well, listen, we've covered a lot of ground and some very exciting topics. I think as we introduced you today, we talked about your experience and your background and just the thought leadership you have in this industry. We literally have thousands of people that now listen to this podcast, so this is going to get in front of a lot of people that I think are going to be very interested in what you've said and your opinions. If they want to reach out or get in touch, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Connect with me on LinkedIn.
Sure.
I've got an open profile. I'm a one-man, currently a one-man operation, but
with a lot of knowledge and experience.
I was going to say, but I think the other thing is I think I can build on the past, but I've got the enthusiasm and the excitement and probably the passion to see it change. There's not many people that have chosen to specialise in this. This is quite a bespoke. It's taken me a few years to carve out this, but yeah, reach out on LinkedIn and let's have a conversation. And you never know, I may dust off my passport and go travelling.
Come and help you out, yeah.
Go help you out.
Excellent. Well, look, I can't believe the time's gone so quickly. It's been a fantastic conversation. I hope everybody who's listening enjoyed it. As I said, please reach out to Mike if you've got any questions. And then really just from the Aforza side, on the whole vertical AI theme, you've probably seen it in the same way on social and LinkedIn, but at the back end of January, we've got the AVA, so Aforza's vertical AI launch. The big launch event where we'll be showcasing what we're doing in that space and the solutions that we're bringing to market. So please, there'll be links in the comment section, but please make your way over. Make sure you sign up for that. But that's been another fantastic episode of the Aforza Vertical AI podcast with Mike Price. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks,
really enjoyed it, and hope everybody did too at home. And please tune in for the next one. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks very much.